Good evening, everyone. My name is Mike Masad. I'm the manager of education programs. Uh, I'm excited to be hosting this panel for you guys where we're going to talk about non-performance careers in the arts. And before I introduce our panelists, just a few quick things. If you have anything that you want to, if you have any questions during this as we go, the easiest thing to do is either use the chat. So in the bottom, you can click on chat or the Q&A. If you put something in the chat, if you could just make sure that it's in the to area, you click on all panelists and attendees so other people can see your question as well. With that, those are sort of all of the logistics. So I'm going to introduce each one of our panelists one by one, and then I'm going to ask you to tell us what your specific job position is and what that means, because a title isn't necessarily very helpful if I have no idea what arts administration is. And then maybe like one outside of work fun fact about you. Let's start with Maureen, just because she's the first cube on my screen.
Oh man, I didn't get to think of what I was gonna say. Hi, I'm Maureen Conroy. I'm the principal librarian of the orchestra. Um, a librarian, we basically get all the music ready and to the stand and hopefully legible and big enough for people to read from. In these COVID times, we've also had to do a lot of finding licensing so we can do our live stream broadcasts that are happening, which can be really easy or really, down the rabbit hole. So that's the basics of what we're doing. There's 3 librarians in the orchestra. Fun fact about me, I like to draw doodles outside of my library time, which is when we get parts back, sometimes we have some fun doodles in the part. Don't do that. We don't like it, even if it makes us laugh. But that's what I like to do in my free time.
Thanks, Maureen. I'm going to ask you more about licensing later and sort of how in the world you learned how to do that. But in the meantime, Grant, why don't you tell us a little bit about what you do?
And to answer one of Mike's question before, arts administration is whatever we want it to be. It's kind of like a magical field to go into. My name is Grant Meacham. I am the director of what's called the Live at Orchestra Hall series at the Minnesota Orchestra, which means I work in programming anything that is not a classical subscription concert. So things like film concerts or shows with headliners like Dessa or Cloud Cult. I work with my producing partner and principal conductor, Sarah Hicks, on thinking of other fun ways to use the otherworldly talents of the Minnesota Orchestra, besides playing symphonies and concertos, which of course they also do beautifully. During COVID times, of course, we haven't had these Live at Orchestra Hall concerts. I've been fortunate to be able to work in producing our This is Minnesota Orchestra series, which you can see online and on Twin Cities PBS and on the radio at NPR. And the fun fact about me is that in pre-COVID times, I commuted to work via motor scooter, and I miss that so much about going to work before COVID. I look at it forlornly in the garage every day.
I was always impressed by how late into the fall you were able to pull that off.
I will ride it until my hands freeze like this. It's pretty amazing.
Thanks, Grant. Next up, we have Cassandra.
Hello. I'm Cassandra Swan. I'm the Director of Ticket and House Services with the Minnesota Orchestra, and I've been with this organization now for just over 20 years, unbelievably. Amazing. I have a background in music, and I've always had an interest in event work and bringing the experience of performing arts and culture to the public. So in my role, I oversee, just like my title says, ticketing and house operations, and that includes directly managing or overseeing the management of all of the audience services, full-time and part-time personnel and volunteers. And that's going to range in numbers up to around sometimes 600 people. We establish all the event and ticketing related policies and procedures, and which, as you can imagine, we've recently done a big revision to incorporate Stay Safe Minnesota guidelines around public events as we're talking about reopening Orchestra Hall. Managing customer service, guest relations, all of the guest communications, I collaborate with the marketing department very closely to develop and implement their sales strategies as it pertains to ticketing. We have a customer relationship management, a CRM software that we call Tessitura. And I play a key role in developing and maintaining that system to support the needs of the Minnesota Orchestra. So I collaborate with other departments around the organization to ensure that they're able to use that system effectively for what they're trying to accomplish. And then we do ticket sales. So we bring in revenue. So I collaborate a lot with the finance department on reporting and budgeting and accounting for that purpose. Oh, and fun fact, I am an avid reader. I read every day. And so I have set a goal for myself this year to read 100 books. And I'm well on the way.
Wow,
Yeah,
it's very
that's my
impressive. The fun fact is really like more for me, to be honest. I'm just like, I just want to get to know my coworkers a little better. Before I go to Don, I wanted, since Cassandra mentioned some departments, I wanted to just say, this is not representative of all of the different departments in the Minnesota Orchestra. What I thought would be interesting was to just highlight some of the departments that you wouldn't see that are unique to an orchestra. So if you want to see, like, we have HR, we have finance, we have marketing, all of these things. If you want to see a comprehensive list, I've put in the chat a link to the Minnesota Orchestra webpage where we have our list of all of our full-time staff and departments. But today we're going to focus on just the roles that are sort of unique to an orchestra. That being said, I'm going to bet we have one more panelist. Last and not least, we have Don Hughes.
Hello, everyone. I'm Don Hughes, and I'm the stage manager for the orchestra. And I do a lot of the physical things for the orchestra. The orchestra has each musician has a chair and a stand, and the percussion guys have, large instruments, xylophones and marimbas and things like that. And all these things need to appear on stage and sometimes get lifted up on risers. And so myself and the other people on the stage crew, get together and we make a plan, and, we look through documents that we get from both the librarian, who tells us, how many musicians we have, and, what the instrumentation is. And sometimes we get things from Grant if it's a show and there's a special event, if there's a speaker on stage or something like that. In addition to presenting the orchestra at Orchestra Hall, I've also done a lot of touring with the orchestra. I've been to Havana and Europe and South Africa and a whole bunch of other countries and some cities in the United States, and much of smaller towns in Minnesota like Marshall or Hibbing, or fun places to go. Anyway, that's about it for work right now. And one fun fact for me is, I'm a grandfather. I've been around the orchestra for 40 years. That's 2 fun facts. And I'm the youngest of 11 children. And I live in the house I grew up in. Still, I got the house. All right, that's it for me, Mike. Go ahead.
Thanks. Those were a lot of fun facts. Thank you. So I was hoping I could ask you guys to sort of talk about and most of you did it already a little bit, but if we could just kind of take one step back and say what your department does, so that we can sort of see how all of these things work together. So I'm going to create a pseudo narrative, and we're going to start with artistic planning. What is artistic planning, Grant, and like what are the responsibilities?
In 4 words, artistic planning is the who, what, where, and when of anything that happens with the Minnesota Orchestra. Who will be on stage playing? What will they be playing? In what location are they doing it? And when is it going to happen? And I think from those 4 questions, everything starts to cascade downward from there. So every season starts with an idea. What pieces would the orchestra like to play? What conductors will be here? When will they be here? What solos would be good to have? What are themes that are running through the season? And we have a team of artistic planners, both on staff and with our conductors, like our music director, Osmo Vanska, or Sarah Hicks, our principal pop conductor. and a committee of musicians on our artistic advisory committee and our marketing team, all of whom weigh in on what's going to make the most balanced orchestra season.
That was very quick. This is very concise. Thank you, Grant. So then once you guys have sort of planned a season, and this doesn't happen in a vacuum, obviously, but for the simplicity of this narrative, right? Then there's a bunch of music that we have planned that somehow has to physically make it to Orchestra Hall. Maureen, how does that happen? And what are all of the, so like, obviously we have some stuff that we own, some stuff that we have to rent, some stuff that we don't worry about paying for, some stuff that we do worry about paying for. And now some things that happen about videos, like how do you guys manage all of that?
I make my own like Excel spreadsheet to kind of try and like keep track of a lot of the things, and it has very many columns of boxes that I need to check. So once we get the programs from our artistic team, I take care of most of the classical sides of things. My colleague Valerie Little takes care of like most of the education pops. And then Eric is the other librarian, kind of bounces between the two of us because it would just be way too many pieces for one person to try and track down. So we first go through that list and see if do we own it? And if we don't own it, where does it come from? Is it something that we can buy? Is it something that we have to rent? Music that's rental it's because it's still under copyright, and the copyright holder has decided that they would prefer to keep control of the physical materials instead of selling it. Like you can buy a John Williams arrangement, even though that's under copyright, but someone like Arnold Schoenberg, their family has decided to keep control of the physical materials, and then they can kind of delve out who is playing it, what, where, and when. For shows that Grant has been in control of, we work with arrangers, so they get us parts that we have to then make in-house. So there's a whole set of licensing that goes along with that, especially if you're making arrangements of a popular tune. Then we have to go through now with all this syncing up with a video, since we're putting this stuff online. So anything that's under copyright has to get a synchronization license. And that is, again, going back to that original copyright holder of the piece and asking for their permission. And sometimes it's really simple. I just put it in as part of my rental order. I just list off every use that we're gonna do for the piece. And then they get back to me with a fee. Sometimes it's me having to kind of track down random people, especially with a lot of the new repertoire that we're doing. There are some composers that they're doing it all themselves. They're making the parts, they are their own representatives, and they don't really, some of them don't really know like what they should be charging, what they're worth. And so I've kind of been trying to help some of those composers through some of that. The library is also responsible for marking the parts. So the music goes through a process of all our principal strings have to look at it, and they are putting bowings in. So telling people how the section moves together and works together. So it starts with our concert master and then goes to the rest of the section, so they can coordinate their bowings with her, and then we put that information into the rest of the section. It's all done by hand so that people can change it on the fly in rehearsal, which happens a lot. These days we're scanning everything so people have access to digital parts, and if they don't want to have like a high touch part, they can put it, they've got their iPads that they can do it, which isn't necessarily like the most copyright like legit thing, but I think publishers are giving us some leeway on that because they understand. Somebody doesn't necessarily want to touch something that I've touched. You know, so that's our basic, like getting it, and then we get it to the stand. Like Don was saying, we make sure that everyone understands what the instrumentation should be. You know, that gives Don a chance to know how things are going to be set up on stage. It also kind of helps me to like double check. So if Don has set the stage some way and I'm like, wait, am I missing a folder? So we kind of help each other out in that way. So that's really basic of what I do.
Very, very simple, very straightforward. So and obviously, like in the much messier real world scenario, as concerts are being planned, there's a lot of times where we ask the librarians, hey, is this piece available? Is it easy to get? Especially when we're looking at sort of newer repertoire, right? Sometimes someone will find a recording and they're like, this piece is really cool. And then we go, no, we don't, there's no music available for this. We don't know where the sheet music is, right? So there's a lot of back and forth between the artistic planning and the library sort of as programs are being developed. And then now that we know what our concert season is and what's happening, what is audience services, Cassandra? Like how does it go from we have a concert planned to then like an experience where people can come and have a good time, hopefully?
Certainly. So audience services, in a word, is about people. We are the staff, the volunteers. It's about the guests and the services that we provide to the guests. So the people that we include, we have about 12 full-time staff who are focused on ticketing, house, event-related work. But the bulk of audience services is really about the part-time staff and the volunteers. And that team includes ticket sales staff and the box office staff, reception staff who are greeting guests, ushers, bartenders, merchandise sellers. We have a lot of opportunities for volunteers to participate in the organization, and we coordinate all of that. And that could be helping out as an usher at an event, or it could be we have a special event like Day of Music, 24 hours of music, or our gala symphony ball where we need extra assistance, and that's when volunteers are very helpful. And then we also manage the intern program. So we might have someone helping Grant or someone else in artistic planning with planning for a specific event, or someone helping in marketing as a graphic designer. So all of those people kind of focus on the different aspects of the customer journey. So other than the musicians, we in audience services are the human face of the organization that guests really come into contact with. So who you are buying a ticket from, whether that's online or by phone or in person, who you call or email or text or chat with when you have a question about something that pertains to your concert experience. We are the people who welcome you to Orchestra Hall, to our home when you arrive for an event, and we make sure that you have everything you need, a program, a beverage, a chair in the auditorium, so that you can have a really positive and memorable experience while you're here visiting us. And I love the work that we do. I love the mission of the Minnesota Orchestra and the people that I work with. And people really tend to be in these guest-facing roles in audience services because they love the art form and because they love interacting with people.
Thank you so much. So then finally, right, so we're at the actual concert night of. Don, what are all of the things that you mentioned a lot of them already, but like, so like, could you talk a little bit about someone like Mike Murnane or
Sure.
or Jay? So
Sure.
Sort of the
So
broader.
on the stage crew, it's split up a little bit. It's not quite like theater. We don't do scenery or anything like that. The stage managers, which is my counterpart Matt and myself, take care of the chairs and stands and the equipment, as I said. And then we have also on staff a full-time lighting person. And we are lucky enough to have Mike Murnane, who previous to coming to Orchestra Hall was one of the top lighting designers in the Twin Cities. He's lit opera and commercials, TV, and we're very fortunate to, at this time where we've moved into television broadcasting, to have Mike's skill and knowledge to help us along and create moods with the lights. And I think if you tune in, that you'll see different colors and shades, and it helps me out because I'm able to hide things in the shadows that he creates, and so I can sneak people out in a very short amount of time. Also on staff, we have a full-time sound person, and that person is Jay Perlman. Jay is very well known in the Twin Cities alternative music scene. He mixes a lot of bands. He's worked at a lot of clubs. He's a first call person for many conventions that have come to the Target Center and the Minneapolis Convention Center. And, we're lucky enough to have people that are very skilled at their craft and are very dedicated. And, we feel very fortunate to be working at this time of COVID, doing these broadcasts. And, we're very focused on what we're doing right now. Not that we weren't before, but this is a little bit different animal for all of us. And, I think we're succeeding at that.
And I think something that's maybe unique to stagehands is just the amount of freelance work that you would do compared to like Cassandra or Grant, for example. So is it common for someone to like have a full-time position at Orchestra Hall, but maybe still pick up some work at another venue or something? There are the lights. Yeah.
Well, yes and no. I mean, there's people. Everyone is on a list from the union to accept work at many other venues in the Twin Cities. Because Orchestra Hall is a full-time job, and sometimes in regular times it's full-time plus a lot of hours. There really isn't a great desire to work otherwise. But sometimes if I've worked my way up in the Twin Cities entertainment business, and I've worked with a number of top rock acts and plays and operas and things like that. If a band that I want to is one of my favorites, like the Rolling Stones, is coming to town, I might take the day off at the hall and slide over and do the gig at the Stones, and slip out early after the easy work is done, and go back to the hall the next day. But there is opportunity to work other places, but during normal times, as I said, we're very fortunate at Orchestra Hall because we're one of there's, I think, 3,000 people in our union hiring list, and there are about 10 people working full time right now. So, things are pretty tough in the entertainment business. We're hoping, that things are going to turn around very soon with audiences being able to come back.
Yeah. So I want to transition a little bit now that we sort of know what these departments are and what they do, to talk about how you get there. And I want to start with Maureen again, if that's okay, because I didn't know this until I started working at the orchestra, that the librarians are actually considered members of the orchestra and are part of the union, just like the musicians are part of the union. And you guys have auditions, but they're sort of not like they're not what I think of when I think of auditions. Could you talk a little bit about sort of the education and then what the audition process looks like?
Sure. Did you put that in the chat? Or is
No, that's a question from an audience member. I'll read it while you talk.
Okay. So I actually have 2 degrees. I have a bachelor's and master's in French horn performance. And I took a lot of horn auditions before, but while I was doing my master's degree at the University of Michigan, go Blue, I was doing a work study program in the library, in the ensembles library. So all of a sudden there was this whole other world that I had no idea was happening. I just took for granted that I picked up my folder full of music and it was what I needed it to be. So from that work study, during the summer between my first and second years of my master's degree, I did an internship in the Detroit Symphony Library. And that turned into an hourly job that I was doing on the weekends. And then once I graduated, I started working there 30, 35 hours a week, as much as they could let me work before they had to give me benefits. So I was an assistant librarian for them. And I found that, I think I mentioned before that I like to doodle. So I in my undergrad almost went into art major. So I found that a lot of the kind of detail work that you do in the library, it really spoke to me for that visual aspect and the visual arts that I wasn't getting really as a performer. And I found that to be fun and fascinating. And I was doing better at library auditions than I was at horn auditions. And I just, it just being a kind of behind the scenes person spoke more to my personality than maybe being on stage and performing. So they are called auditions. And I think they call them that because when a librarian is part of the collective bargaining of the orchestra, the musicians want to have, the players want to have control over who is coming into that group, because we can really like screw up a performance. I mean, if we get the wrong parts and put them out there, if we haven't had that conversation with our colleagues, it can really, you know, and that whole adage, time is money. If you're messing up a rehearsal, there's only a finite amount of time to get things performance ready. So you want someone who knows how to read music, kind of knows what you need to see on stage, and someone who can get along with. So I think the players like to have as much say in that as possible. So you will see that librarians usually are part of the members of the orchestra. So, and right now my daughter's going to come in and say good night. Give me 1 second. Hi, good night. I love you. Come check on me. Good night. So a library audition usually is in 3. You're going to wave. Okay. Hi. A library audition is usually in 3, like 3 things happen. Thank you. You're a nice thing too. Sorry, everyone. So you usually start with a test, and it's a skills test where it's basically like our orchestral excerpts, right? It's asking, you know, foreign terms, or what are the nicknames of symphonies, like what are the keys of all the Beethoven symphonies and their opus numbers, things that you kind of have front of mind, but I think it's more if you can answer these things in a test without like resources, it kind of tells people if you're, how much you've been working with the music and how familiar with stuff you are. Then after that, there's usually a skills test, like do some transpositions, make a new part, you know, what does your manuscript look like? And then there's an interview round. So you're getting drilled with questions about, you know, here's this situation, how would you handle it? And that's just really, they want to know that you're somebody that isn't going to be a pain to work with, right? Any interview that any of us would have to take. So just kind of getting to know your personality. So every orchestra does them a little differently, but there's usually, like I say, it starts with this test, which can be the sweeping, like, oh man, I have no idea. Or you get lucky sometimes. I usually, when I'm preparing for these auditions, or when I had been preparing for them, would go through an orchestra's entire website. And if I could find a previous season, I would print that all out and I would prepare it like I would have to do any other season. So when I see a certain piece on there that's going to raise a red flag, usually that will show up on a test, because they're like, this raised a huge red flag for us. I wonder what so-and-so would do in this same situation. It could be weird instrumentation. It could be like, oh, this composer is going to come in and like, you know, want to change things last minute. It could be any of that stuff, but you kind of fall into a pattern of seeing like what's on these tests and what are like gotcha questions, I guess. What are, you want me to answer those, or do you want to?
I was thinking we could save them to the end, but
okay. Okay.
Yeah.
Does
So
that kind of answer what you're thinking? Okay.
yeah, that was perfect. I think because like when I hear librarian, I'm like, oh, you get a master's in library science and become a librarian, but it's not you're a musician. Like that is the training you get. Like
Yeah,
I don't think there are any librarians who who don't get a music degree, right?
yeah, that's right. I think there are maybe a few that do have that library science degree, but that's very rare. Most of us come from a performing background or music history. There's a few composers out there, and I think it's more like an apprenticeship to get into these. Like there's like doing internships and kind of getting in that way than getting like a specialized degree in music library. And there's no real program out there to kind of steer you on the way.
Thank you. And yeah, people feel free to keep sending in your questions. I'm going to save them to the end, but librarian is popular. You're getting a lot of questions, Maureen. Cassandra, could you, there's no such thing as an audience services degree. So what is the pathway to a role like yours?
Sure, I'll tell you my background and how I kind of arrived here, and then give you maybe a couple of tips of things that you could do to get to something like this. So my background is in music. I mentioned that before. So I have a degree in music education and flute performance. However, after being a teacher for about 3 years, I confirmed that that really wasn't what I wanted to focus on. I would prefer to be in arts administration. And also, the entire time that I was in college, I worked at a performing arts center to get some experience in ticketing and in events. So when I moved from Wisconsin, yes, Cheesehead, thank you, to Minnesota, I applied at that point. I kind of switched it up and I applied to various arts organizations and schools that have theaters for front of house work. So that was my path. And then I landed at the Minnesota Orchestra and kind of started in ticket services and ended up as the department director. But when I went to college, the arts administration degree wasn't introduced at my school until the very last year when I was student teaching. So I didn't really have that option. But clearly, that degree is a great choice for pursuing this work. However, I don't feel that my education degree or the time that I spent teaching was wasted, because so much of what I do is teaching and mentoring staff, communicating with colleagues and staff and the general public. So I think any education that you have in the arts world is going to be helpful in these positions. And really, on the ground experience is key in securing arts administration work. Many people in front of house are actually educated and trained in other fields entirely. And then they pick up work at an arts organization because it's a passion and it can help pay the bills. And then they find out that they're really suited to the work and they love it. And they end up staying there and moving up kind of through the ranks into various full-time positions. And that's very valid. So I would recommend, the arts administration degree is clearly one path you can use, but I would also say part-time work, an internship, even a volunteer role at an arts organization that you are interested in is a key way to get a foot in the door. For audience services, a given hospitality, customer service experience, those things are always going to be preferred. Learning project management skills would definitely be beneficial. So much of what I in particular do is coordinating the various teams of people who are accomplishing different projects on different timeline, and it's quite a variety of different types of things. So being able to keep all of that straight is helpful with project management skills. And if you see yourself in the future managing a team of people, then get some knowledge in personnel management. Try not to just stumble into that on the job. If you can help it, it'll go much easier if you prepare for it. So, what does it mean to hire? What does it mean to train, to coach, to write a performance review, to write a growth plan, to delegate, to hold people accountable for their work, to promote, and to sometimes fire people? There are lots of elements to personnel management, and there's lots of resource resources for the knowledge out there. So get some theoretical book knowledge, but then also get some field experience supervising a team in a part-time job, and see if you can secure a mentor who can advise you.
Thank you, Cassandra. Don, I'm going to ask you the same question. How does one become a stagehand? First step is join the union. After that, it's a complete mystery to me. So
Well,
could you walk us
usually,
through that?
you know, the work for the stagehands union is often very hit and miss. You know, sometimes it's very busy and sometimes it's not very busy. So, you know, there's not a whole lot of people that make a full-time wage out of it, but there's a lot of people that make a good part-time living out of it. And you know, that's for the big rock shows that come to town. You know, if Beyonce is coming to town, sometimes she calls up, you know, her manager calls up and says, I need 300 people at the Target Center on the crew. And so, you know, we have to find 300 people to be at the Target Center at 7 a.m. on a certain morning. And, you know, we get our, you know, the regular guys, and then we get some not so regular guys. And then we have to, you know, get referrals from people. You know, do you have somebody that you think could work if on short notice, if we need them? And oftentimes we do. And, you know, these are usually younger people. And, you know, we're glad to have them because a lot of them are very enthusiastic for the work. The work is difficult. You know, all you have to do is follow the directions, and, you know, everything's going to be, you're going to have a good day at work. And, you know, it can be exciting. You know, you can, you know, there's a chance you might see the performer or the performance. And you know, when the rock shows start coming back, you know, we're going to need people because we don't know, you know, how many people that we lost with COVID and how many people moved. And, you know, there's going to be a little bit rebuilding going on. So, you know, if you are interested, you can call Local 13 and apply to become a temporary employee. And you know, if we'll ask you a whole bunch of questions, and there's a test you take, and if you pass, then we'll put you on a list, and when we need you, we'll give you a call. And you know, that's good for somebody that's, you know, in their early 20s, and you know, they're available at this time, and you know, they can go work at 11 o'clock at night till maybe 4 o'clock in the morning, and you know, you get a decent wage for that, and you know, it's guaranteed. It's a gig. And the way I got into this is I went out to New York for college, and that was unsuccessful, and I cut my ties early, and I came back to the Twin Cities, and I called my brother and I said, I need a job. And he said, well, the stage manager from O'Shaughnessy Auditorium, which is in St. Paul, is sitting at the bar here, and you know, let me talk to him and see if he needs anybody. And sure enough, he did. And so I joined the student stage crew at St. Catherine's while I was a student at the University of Minnesota. And as I may have mentioned, the orchestra was in residence, had a St. Paul residence at O'Shaughnessy at that time. And so, you know, I came in contact with the orchestra immediately, and, you know, the crew, they had, you know, a couple of guys that are passed away and retired now. You know, we got along great, and you know, I was, you know, they took me under their wing, and you know, showed me how to set an orchestra and how to put the instruments together. And I thought, you know, this is a great thing. You know, this is maybe what I want to do in life. And you know, that work was seasonal, and you know, along with that, the orchestra also did 19 concerts outside during the summer at that time, which was, you know, which took a large crew because you did it on portable stage, and all the gear had to come, all the orchestra gear had to come off the truck. And so, I was doing a lot of those. I was also picking up other gigs, and I was also a student at that time, and that was kind of floundering for me because I was doing a gig every day, and trying to be a student. And I had to make a decision, an opportunity to tour with a show, which was Sesame Street Live, came up, and I toured the country with them for a year when I was 22 years old, and that was a great experience. I played 26 cities around the country and Madison Square Garden in New York for a month, and I gained a lot of experience there. And a few years after that, I was at the Ordway as the prop person, and I was there for 17 years. And the orchestra that was their St. Paul residence at that time. They did 19 concerts a year there. And, here was my friends from the orchestra again. And then when I left the Ordway, I gave Orchestra Hall a call, and the stage manager, Tim, said, well, I need somebody tomorrow. And so, I went to work at the hall the next day, and I kind of stayed there on an informal basis, and then I got a part-time contract, and then finally, after many years, I got a full-time contract as the stage manager.
I'm glad you clarified that it wasn't Beyonce herself that was calling, it was her manager. I was about to switch careers right now. So thanks for setting me straight on that one.
But I've known her manager for 35 years from a show he did at Ordway with People Bryson and some other people. And so when Beyonce comes to town, I do that gig, and then I get the good jobs on that one because of my friend. So
you're very well connected, Don.
I've been around.
I feel like Don has a guy for stuff.
Don has a guy for everything. Yeah.
Don also has stories. If you ever backstage right at Orchestra Hall, just ask Don about some touring experience. Don has great stories that could last for days and days of standing backstage at Orchestra Hall.
Yes, and the only thing I think I've seen 10,000 shows in my life, and my only regret is I didn't wear earplugs when I was young, and I wear hearing aids now that I'm older.
Thank you so much, Don. Grant, so this is going to be the last question I ask, and then I'm going to start asking questions from the people that have been submitted. So same thing, sort of, there is a master's in arts administration that exists, but to my understanding, it is a newer degree, so not everyone in the field has it, right?
It is, and I went to college in the late 90s. My undergrad degree is in arts administration, but that was still a very new specialization at that point. And I learned so much from my arts admin degree. I would not trade it. I would not say it's a necessity to go in this field. So much learning also happened through doing internships. And I had a lot of great opportunities. And I would even say anyone who wants a job in the arts, find a way to work in the arts as early as you can, whether that's volunteering for someone like Cassandra. Get yourself into a place where art is being made and just poke around. I mean, one of my first jobs, I was an intern at an opera company upstate New York called Glimmerglass Opera. And my job was more or less to pick up singers and drive them to rehearsal. So I really just got to sit and listen to people who make music for a living. What makes them tick? What makes them frustrated? What makes them happy? If they come out of a rehearsal, are they reserved, or are they just sort of bursting with energy? You just learn personalities. And I learned, I was 21 years old that summer. This was the kind of personality I wanted to be around. And I will even tell people my path in the arts, I never really wanted to be a musician. I mean, I did music in the way that anyone does music when you're, growing up and are kind of into the arts, but I never wanted to be a musician. I just kind of wanted to hang out with them. And, I married a musician. My wife is a violinist. But the personality that it takes to go out and do something artistic in front of lots and lots of people every day is a fascinating one. And I just wanted to surround myself with people who had that kind of creative energy. So I think my advice would be just do internships. When I was in college, I spent all of my summers interning at various arts organizations. My first job, I started a job at Boston Lyric Opera 9 days after I graduated from college. I just couldn't wait to get out and start doing this. and I've been in Minnesota for 6 years now, and in so many ways, this feels like just the nadir of what I've done. This is just a great organization that everyone, everyone on the screen here and everyone within the organization, I've never been around a group of colleagues who value the organization more than everyone I work with in the Minnesota Orchestra. It's truly amazing among our peer orchestras. It's a great place to be.
Yeah, and I feel very fortunate because this is the first and so far hopefully only orchestra that I've worked at. And I hear it from friends who work at other places when we sort of talk about our experiences, and like I didn't realize how unique sort of a culture it was here until I started talking to more people from other places. That being said, I'm going to start asking other people's questions because there are a lot, and there are a lot for Maureen. So the library is an area of interest for a lot of people.
I think it's just because nobody has heard of music library.
So I'm going to just scroll up to the top. So the first one, we answered that. It just came in essentially the same time I asked you about the fact that you're in, what that looks like and you're part of the orchestra. There's another question here. Are you required to have superb musical composition training or skills to be part of the library? Could you talk maybe a little bit? So you mentioned the test. So it's more about knowing what's in the music. You don't necessarily have to be writing music, right?
Not for this orchestra, but there are, I think for a long time, the Indianapolis Symphony, because they had such a huge pops presence, they wanted their one of their librarians to be an arranger. So I think the person who is the principal librarian in Indianapolis now does have those skills. I think it's pretty rare. And it's not something that we're required to do, which is good because I wouldn't have this job if that were something. There are people who, especially people who Grant has worked with and kind of cultivated with the groups that have come through that they're composers and they know how to write for the orchestra. So I do need to know how to transpose, which is a different. Like I said, I was a horn player, so that actually is okay. I can do that because sometimes, not as much anymore. I think that people have kind of figured out that they can put things in the finale and kind of do it for themselves. There are a lot of programs that are accessible, but when I came here from Utah, the Utah Symphony, and that also had an opera branch to it. So I had to do several operas a year, and we would do an opera gala. And sometimes you'd have to transpose the orchestra down a step so the singer could, do a few different arias on a thing and not kill their voice. So less of the composition skills and more of the just being able to transpose things down a key or just know the key of things, and that just comes from your music training as a player that I had.
Yeah, as a flute player, so I play a C instrument, transposition is my nightmare. Hate it.
I run into that since I'm a horn player. I start double transposing things. I'm like, oh wait, but I mean, so I have to really think
about it. There's another one here for you, Maureen. It's long, so I'm going to kind of summarize it. So apologies to Earl. Given that it's Women's History Month, are there many women in the position of librarian? And then he talks about how there are very few BIPOC librarians in the field. So then he also asks, how diverse is the field?
So there are quite a few women, actually, principal librarians as well. It's kind of, I feel like the last few big jobs that have opened, women have gotten the job. So you mentioned Nicole Jordan, who just got the job in Philadelphia. She was the principal librarian in Atlanta before she got that job. And the Met has all four librarians are women. And one of which as a woman of color. It's not unfortunately, it's not a super diverse field. It's I would say it's kind of like the orchestra. There are definitely people of color who are librarians, and you have to know that like the library field also covers the universities. All those music programs have have librarians, so they're music librarians or ensembles librarians. So there is some diversity in those ranks, but I think we kind of reflect what you maybe would see on stage. So definitely could be doing better in the diversity side of it, but we do have a lot of gains in women in the library, so that's nice. There are quite a few libraries actually that now I'm thinking of it that are all women. I think the National Symphony, our library here, Valerie and I and Eric. Eric has been in the orchestra for 43 seasons, I think. Now. He just had his library anniversary, so we're lucky to have that knowledge with us too.
There are more questions for you, Maureen, but just to switch things up, I'm gonna ask Cassandra a question. How important is it to have a strong background in marketing? I'm thinking about how analytics is critical to your job.
Good question. I personally do not have a background in marketing, but I do work very closely with the marketing department. So I think that's one of the areas that I've kind of picked up in my work over the course of the years. So it certainly doesn't hurt to have a marketing background, because ticketing especially works pretty collaboratively with the marketing department. But I don't think you have to have a really deep background in like graphic design or something of that nature, or even necessarily sales strategies, maybe approaching it more from the aspect of communication and brushing up on all of those communication skills, since you do so often have to write communications or proofread communications to guests and make sure everything is clear, as well as the face-to-face interactions that you're going to have with guests either at events or over the phone as they're ordering tickets. So maybe thinking about it more in terms of communication rather than marketing specifically would be helpful. But really any of that background is going to be helpful in some way, shape, or form, because I do think audience services really is the department that crosses so much with other departments that if you have some sort of background knowledge in any other departments, it would serve you in audience services.
Grant, there's a question here for you. Can a person be in your position as an arts administrator and also be a performing member of the orchestra? Yeah,
it is rare, but there's a fantastic example right here in the Twin Cities. Across the river at the St. Paul Chamber Orchestra, the brilliant Hugh Young Kim is both the principal violin and the artistic director. That's a novel arrangement, but it's not saying that it cannot be done. I think often the reason it's not done is both of those jobs. If you're playing full-time in an orchestra, that is such an all-encompassing thing to do. You're preparing music constantly. You have to play at your top. Likewise, if you're an administrator at a full-time orchestra, it is a job that comes with its own challenges and schedules, but it is not completely unheard of.
Yeah, I think it's a little more common in some of the smaller ensembles. So orchestras that are maybe performing like 5 or 6 concerts a season.
Right. It's rare, of course, yeah, for an orchestra that's out there 42 weeks a year, like the Minnesota Orchestra. Two very different skill sets, but it's not impossible to find in the same person.
Yeah, I know, I don't know if he's still there, but the Reno Philharmonic, their CEO, was actually one of their bass players too. So I have no idea how he managed.
Likewise, the CEO of the Milwaukee Symphony was a former section trumpet player there. So yeah. It's oftentimes people will transition from one to the other, but holding at the same time is a little bit rarer.
Yeah. So many questions for Don. There's a question for you. Okay. You had mentioned there's a test from the union.
Yes.
What kind of questions are on this test?
It's basic theatrical skills. They might ask you about some certain measurements, some diameters, some you might have to, read a book about theater to know where, which way is stage left and which way is stage right and what's upstage and what's downstage. And there's terms in theater, the ceiling is known as the grid, and you have to have a basic running knowledge of this to get along on a day-by-day basis. So, you're asked a lot of definitions of theatrical words, and those are easily found in any basic theater textbook. The University of Minnesota has one out that's a standard in the industry that I would recommend. I can't think of the name of it right now.
Are any of the questions Beyonce specific?
I wish.
No, don't. Yeah, they said don't get too close.
The last question here is for everyone. There are more questions for you, Maureen, but I feel like we should end with maybe a chance for other people to give input. Libraries.
I know, 10 points for Gryffindor over there.
Can I just throw one thing out there? If you want to learn more about library stuff, there's the Major Orchestral Librarian Association, MOLA, has a website. I think it's mola.org. mola-inc.org, I think is what it is. Because if you just type in MOLA, there's a huge fish that's a mola, apparently. It will come up when you Google MOLA. But there's a great thing. There's one of the links up there will be like what we do, and there's kind of a career overview. So I think it could answer some of the questions that have come up in the chat.
Yeah, and real quick, I think people have also asked if they can get involved. If we have apprenticeships things, normally yes, right now no, right?
Yeah, we'll put something out, and I've put stuff on MOLA. MOLA is a great place to go for job openings in libraries too, but yeah, definitely not right now.
May I add, if you're interested in lighting or sound aspects of the entertainment business, that a lot of churches these days are investing a lot of money in lighting and sound systems, and I would suggest that you visit one of your local churches and ask if they need help, and a lot of times I bet they would. You can play with the lighting board and figure it out, and then maybe figure out the soundboard too, and just the basics of how to plug in a microphone and actually make it come out of the speakers that are hanging up in the air. So your local church is a good place to go out and put your hands on gear and spend a little time with it and learn it.
Yeah, that's where I learned a lot of things and broke a lot of things. So final question. Also in the chat, I put the link to MOLA's website. I also put a link for the IATSE Locals website if people want to check that out. Final question for everyone, because I think it's a really good question. How do you measure success in your roles? Clearly having people skills is important in all of these roles, but are there other less obvious skills that should be considered should anyone wish to enter these fields? So how do you measure success? And then this was actually one of the questions I was going to ask, but we ran out of time. And then top 3 skills in your field. Let's start with Don.
Well, I work with a lot of musicians, and I work with them on a day-by-day basis, and these are all individuals, and I try to have a lot of empathy for these people, and they're not at the hall 40 hours a week like I am. They come in for a rehearsal 3 times a week for a couple hours. So I want to do what I can to make sure that they can play their best when they're on stage, make sure that they have the proper stuff and it's oriented in the way they like it. And so, you talk to people and, you pick up on their nuances of what they desire to play. Another thing is determination. And, a lot of these projects that we undertake are are big, and you just have to keep going and going. If you have to put up a polarizers with a 18-foot extension to the stage, I mean, that's very difficult stuff, but you just keep going and going and going, and you have to be flexible. And the only other thing, to be a success in the business that I'm in, a very important thing is punctuality. And you can't do the job if you're not there. And if you're not on time, then it makes people wonder if you are dependable. And so if you get a job or you get a gig, just make sure that you're there on time and you're ready to go, and you're in a good position to put a good day in at work.
Thank you, Don. Grant.
I would like to say I measure success by the metric of, do people want to come back and work with you again? Are you able to build relationships with colleagues, and in my case, with artists? And an example I put out, we're fortunate the orchestra has a wonderful relationship with the artist Dessa, and that has not come up by accident. That has been years and years of us working together and coming up with new ideas together, and really working with everyone within the orchestra and all these departments in front of you, with musicians, with stagehands like Don, with librarians, to really make it a good experience and make it the kind of relationship where we want to figure out new things that Dessa and the orchestra can do together. And that's really being able to watch relationships like that grow in interesting directions is really rewarding in what we do. And echoing a lot of what Don said, you have to be punctual, you have to be kind, you have to be the kind of person that people want to spend so much time around, because all of us spend so much time with these jobs. And you've got to love music and the people making it. And it's still a job. It's not Shangri-La every day. There will be days where it's like any other job. But if you're going to come back and not wake up in the morning and say, oh, I have to go to work, but okay, I'm going to go to work, even if after the occasional bad day, if you're able to shake that off because you love what you're doing and you love the people who are doing it.
Maureen.
I think my best measure of success is if they don't know the library exists, right? So like nothing has fallen apart. Players could sit down and play and not have to like think about the music at all. It's just there. So that can be a bit humbling, because you're not going to get high fives every day for doing your job, right? It's kind of what Don was saying. You want everything to be where it needs to be and ready to go. And if no one is upset about stuff, you've done your job right. And that's a good feeling. I know that whoever put that question in said people skills, obviously, but it really is a big part of this. There's a lot of egos to navigate, especially when you're talking like guest artists and conductors or players even, and it's not bad egos, it's just different egos, right? And so you need to just have some deference to how people, where they need to be able to walk out onto stage and do what they have to do in front of a bunch of people. So I think just being able to read the room is a good one, and knowing whether you should walk up to somebody and ask them that question, that even if you really need to ask them, maybe you don't need to ask them right now. So that's I think a good skill to have. And yeah, just and being okay with having to ask those questions. In my jobs, I have to ask a lot of questions, and sometimes maybe somebody won't appreciate that you have to ask that question, but you want to make sure that that it's right. And the only way you're going to know is if you ask that quote unquote dumb question. So just not being afraid of just like, I really need to get this information from you and I need to ask it, but also knowing the right time when to ask it.
Yeah, I think something I've noticed about sort of a lot of people that work in this field, because it is so much of like sort of the behind the scenes work, and you very rarely do you get credit, right? And people only, for the most part, people only start asking who you are if things go wrong, right? And so I think there is sort of a service mentality that a lot of people in this field tend to have, right? And sort of being sort of in tune with the person that you're talking to, knowing if they need something, if now's not a good time. I think that's sort of a common trait in a lot of the people I've encountered in sort of this industry. Finally, Cassandra could for this question.
Sure. There are probably two key ways that I measure success for audience services. The first one seems pretty obvious: ticket sales. How many tickets have we sold? How many people do we have in those seats? And are people return buying? They want to come back here again and again. So that's a pretty key data measurement. And then the other place that I look is in customer feedback. So we do a lot of surveying of our attendees, and I read all of them, and I read every single customer comment that's submitted to us. So I look for trends in those responses. I look for areas that we can make improvements. And quite often, honestly, Minnesota Orchestra is doing a great job in all of those areas. But those are probably the two key places. And as far as skills, I would say adaptability is a really key one. Every day and every event will be different. So if you need routine and sameness, maybe this isn't the place for you. But if you thrive on change, come on in. The water's fine. Problem solving, both proactively and reactively. Can you solve problems? Can you think on your feet? And can you make a decision with the information that is presented to you? Is very important. And finally, collaboration. We work with so many different people: customers, clients, colleagues, other artists. Can you work together? Can you find common ground? Very little of what we do is us working individually. We are always collaborating on projects. And I think really the beauty of audience services is that there is often room for everyone in this department, whether you're an introvert or an extrovert or a wallflower or a leader or an analyst. There's somewhere that you can find a home in this kind of big department.
Thank you, Cassandra. So thank you, everyone on this panel, for taking time out of your evening to do this. I know there were bedtimes and bath times and a lot of things that you had to juggle around to make this happen. So thank you for taking time to do this for us. Thank you for the people watching for sticking with us. I know we went a little bit longer. If this was interesting to you, we have one more panel left. It's going to be on the audition process specifically. So keep an eye out on the website for that. Also, I have to do the required check out our broadcasts. We have one tomorrow. It will be exciting because this is our first time doing something with guest artists since COVID. I almost said the lockout, whole other thing.
And wait till you see where we put the piano.
So be sure to
And
check
how
out
the
our
camera
website.
is hitting the piano.
It's all new. It's all exciting. Thank you, everyone, and have a good rest of your evening.
It was a pleasure, everyone.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you. Thanks, Mike.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye, everyone.